Hello, everybody. My name is Jeff H. Malum, and welcome to a new podcast. And by that, I don't just mean a new podcast episode of the Being an Author podcast. No, it's actually a new podcast, which sadly does not have a name yet. But if you see that video, you will know how I will finally decide to name it. So you are ahead of me right now. Now, I'm not alone today. So let me right away greet you. Hi, Dave.
Hi. Yeah, can't help it, but I'm here as well. Hi, I'm Dave.
That is Dave, the other voice. Now, you're asking yourself, what is this new podcast? And who is Dave? And why are we talking? What the hell is that? So let me briefly explain to you what this is about. Basically, it is a more interview-based podcast. So unlike the Being an Author podcast, where it's just me talking to the mic and never stop talking and just monologuing forever, this is a dialogue. And this dialogue is, as I just said, more based on interviews. So I have some questions. Some of them are prepared, but I think most of them will come out of context of our conversation. And the goal is to kind of create a survey on different people's literary experiences. And by different people, I mean, hopefully, people from all over the world, from different backgrounds and different literary interests, and so on and so on. Now, as you might guess now, Dave is our first guest, and he will introduce himself to you in a second. But don't get too used to his voice, because there is already going to be another guest in the next episode. I cannot say how many times a month or a year I will upload this. I'm currently planning on once a month, but I'm sure that won't be a thing sooner or later, so I won't make any promises now. But there will be new guests every episode. And I will really try to lay the focus on these guests, because if I were to speak about my own literary experiences on the same level as they would, it would probably be myself saying the same things over and over again in each episode, which doesn't make any sense. So consider me more as a mediator or a moderator in this podcast. But of course, I will also give input. It's not just that I'm posing questions. There is going to be a conversation, but it should be more focused on the guests. And they are not really prepared most of the time. So I just ask them, hey, interested in a podcast about your literary experiences? Doesn't matter what they are. Yes. Okay. Nice. See you next week. Okay. Dave. Hello. Who are you?
Well, that's a good question, actually. To answer it with one of my favorite authors, maybe, wer bin ich und wenn ja, wie viele? Who am I, and if so, how many? I don't know. The only thing that I know is, like, people on the internet know me as Dave, usually, even though that's not my real name. My real name is Jan, Jan, and I'm from North Rhine-Westphalia. It's not a failure, but it sounds like it. It's not. It's a cool state in Germany, actually.
Depends.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. And I'm 30 years of age, and I'm a curious person when it comes to music, media in general, many different things. And I've known Julian, it's strange to pronounce your name in English, actually.
Well, actually, those people on this channel know me as Jeff.
Jeff. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, don't worry.
Jeff, of course. I've known you for like 7 years, I think, now.
Yep.
Which is crazy to think about, but and I'm really happy to be here.
You know what's even more crazy? That we haven't only known us for 7 years now, but we've only met twice.
That's true. Yeah,
7 years.
And
that is so weird.
You even met a mutual friend of ours first before we actually met, which is also funny.
And like 10 times more.
Yeah.
that's
really
life. Weird. Yep, that's life. Now, you just said you are, in general, very interested in media, which is why you are also very active on YouTube. So perhaps viewers might already know you as either Dave Durden TV or VlogDave, or the creator of the German podcast, right?
That is true.
So the first two are on YouTube. Is the podcast also on YouTube, or is it just on Spotify?
The podcast is sort of like an indirect part of the VlogDave channel, even though it's also its own entity, so outside of YouTube.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much a mixed thing. But you can also find it on the VlogDave channel. It's also available on like the common podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple, and whatnot. So both pretty much, yeah.
Great. Dear viewers, if you are interested in the German language and German culture, definitely make sure to have a look at these channels. Because even though I'm German, my channel focus is not on Germany. Maybe there will be some videos about German books one day, but main focus is literature in general, and not the German culture. So if you are English speaking and interested in that, go have a look at Dave's channels. And
thank you very much. I wasn't paid for that, by the way.
Yeah, that's right.
Just saying.
Okay. So, Dave, one more question about you.
Yeah.
Apart from those literature things, how was your day?
It was a pretty good day, actually. Like, I'm not really the biggest fan when it comes to the weather and temperatures outside right now in Germany, because
same.
winter is coming, so to speak. And, well, it's already here, actually.
It is.
But apart from that, yeah, I can't complain, to be honest. I mean, yeah. How was your day?
Actually, I can't complain either. But there isn't much to tell, because I woke up around 8 a.m., then went to university because it started at 9. And then I was there until like 7 p.m. and now I'm here, so there isn't much to tell.
That's the spirit.
Yeah, there was some switching between in-present teaching and online teaching. So in between, I had to go from university to my home, but it was still university. So full day, like almost every day currently.
Yeah,
but it's fun, so I really don't complain.
Yeah,
that's
the way it should be.
Great. Now, if that's all you want to share about your day,
I mean, I usually begin working at 10 a.m. And then I work until like 4:30 in the afternoon usually, and then I get back home, like eat something, and probably would either write a new script for a video, or I would film a video, edit one, like do stuff for YouTube in general, or record maybe a podcast episode, talk with friends, whatever, different things. And so right before this podcast, I actually filmed 2 new videos.
Oh, great.
And yeah, it's fun.
That is nice to hear.
Yeah.
So over the course of the day, did you read anything? And by anything, I really mean anything.
Yes.
For example?
I read a few articles about companies from my region, because that's part of my job. I'm a social media manager at a local publishing company, basically media publishing company. And because I'm also responsible for making social media posts about those articles, I of course have to read them in order to make the posts. So I have to stay informed about what's going on company-wise, business-wise in my region. And that's also interesting, because through that job, I actually have learned much more about companies here, which I actually didn't know before at all, partially. Yeah. And I mean, emails, email correspondence with colleagues or with clients of ours. So that's pretty much, and the script that I wrote for the videos. I think that's pretty much it. And of course, WhatsApp, messengers,
sure.
What you wrote as well, even though I forgot about that like 10 seconds afterwards. Immediately. No, I didn't. No.
Okay, so lots of nonfiction there. That leads me to, I think, the general question that basically opens up today's, major topics, so to say. And I would love to hear from you. Could you elaborate a little on, how you would explain your reading behavior, but well, also in a connection to fictional reading.
Well, that's an interesting question, actually, because usually I am not someone who actually reads regularly. I do it like occasionally, mostly on the weekend. For instance, on a Saturday, once I got up and ate for breakfast, drank a coffee, maybe watched something like Let's Play episodes or like some interesting YouTube videos or whatnot. Then I would usually read maybe 1 hour or 1.5 hours. Because then, like, my mind is still fresh, if that makes sense, and I'm not that much of a fan of reading books when it comes to like late hours in the day. Sometimes because my concentration, my focusing isn't there anymore, as it should be for certain, writings, if that makes sense. And but it can be also quite spontaneous at times, to be honest. Like, I don't usually plan when I'm gonna read something. It's pretty much happens in the moment. So, yeah.
Okay, I understand. So basically, you are not reading that much compared to, well, many other people.
Not in the like traditional sense, I don't think. I mean, it's much more common that I would read like a single article about a certain topic that I'm interested in, as opposed to reading a whole book.
Yeah.
Within like a short period of time.
Why would you say is that?
Well, that is, I guess you can call it a problem that I have, but it's like a luxurious problem, I guess. I'm someone who is fascinated by and interested in many things. And sometimes it's hard for me to just focus on one thing that I'm interested in, because I might be reading a text about something, and then I actually think about a different topic, and I think, oh yeah, that's cool as well. I want to read a text about that now. So it sort of goes hand in hand, and I don't really distinguish too much between those things, because, as I've said before, I'm interested in many different things for many different reasons, and maybe that also has to do with that. It's an interesting question, actually. Never thought about that. Maybe it also has to do with time management, because sometimes I'm just like busy with stuff and I want to get things done. And even though it's nonsense to some degree, I guess sometimes I subconsciously think I could be reading like a book right now, like for the next 2 hours maybe. But then I also go like, okay, yeah, but in those 2 hours, I could also be productive with other things and create something as opposed to consume something. And I guess that would be my spontaneous answer to that.
That's interesting. I think it's in general, especially when people who are listening to this podcast, they are listening to a podcast on a literature channel. So it's, well, quite expectable that they are probably very interested in literature, those people who are listening. And I think it's very interesting for those people to hear why, perhaps people who read less than they do in the fictional connection, why they don't, or like why they read less. I personally have similar problems, but what is also important for me is that, there are so many different media, and I would say that both my watch list on movies and series still to watch, as well as my backlog for video games, as well as my backlog for books, they are all of the same length. So there are like 1,000 movies I still want to watch, 1,000 books I still want to read, 1,000 video games I still want to read. And since all of these are, fictional texts, it's sometimes hard to decide. And when you decide for a movie, then that means perhaps one book less. Would you agree on that, or is it different for you?
I would totally agree on that, actually. I mean, it's all about prioritizing and preferences, I guess. And I think there are two things that can be said about that from my perspective is that one, like the accessibility of those things, of different types of media through the internet, for instance, has made it harder for many people to decide on what they want to focus on at a certain point in time, I feel. And the second thing is there is so much media out there, and with each day, like just, you know, taking YouTube videos as an example, I guess, I forgot the exact number, but I think it's like up to a couple of thousands of hours per day getting uploaded. And there is so much you can potentially consume and read and hear and listen to that it just gets increasingly harder to focus on single things.
Absolutely. You know, by the time you finish reading a book, there are like maybe 20 new ones on the market or more. That's, of course, you can't consume everything.
And some might even say, or go as far to say, there is too much out there already. Like too much music, too many books, you know, and just too much. And you're pretty much, you don't know where to start and where to end with it.
I would agree, which is also why it's so hard for newcomer creators nowadays to get recognized. You know, for example, I am a newcomer author. I think I've published my first book.
But a very good one. A very good one.
I've published my first book in December 2020. And I realized if I would not have had friends who were interested in that and would have bought the first book and thus also, you know, pushed me a little in the algorithms, so to say, there would have probably been 0 views on the book because there are like a million other books releasing at the same time.
Right. And there is, I don't know where I heard it actually, or maybe I do. I think it was in another podcast that I listened to with the German philosopher Richard David Precht. And he has also published many books throughout his life and career, philosophical books for the most part. And he also said, like, with his experience when it comes to publishers, it's nowadays usually like, okay, they will get maybe 30 to 40 scripts per day. And they just say, you know, we can't deal with you, like 20 of you per se, sometimes even without having read them, because it's just too much. They have to make like, you know, decisions there and say, yeah, it's just too much and we can't even read them.
Yep.
Maybe they would be like, that's no reflection on the quality of them. It's simply because, you know, we don't have the time, we don't have the human capacities, if that makes sense, like to enough employees and staff that can read that stuff in time. So, I mean, and that's pretty sad actually, but I guess that is the current situation.
Yep. That basically kills one of the questions that I just thought about. But no, don't worry. That's totally okay. Out of the conversation we just had over the last couple of minutes, especially when we were talking about different medias to choose from and priorities, I was wondering how you think about the sentence that books are dying out nowadays. However, I would still love if you'd answer to that, but since we just now spoke about how many scripts there are being sent to publishers, that kind of is an argument against it, right?
I guess so, yeah. I mean, I'm not a fan of general statements like that anyway, because in 9 out of 10 cases, they are like not accurate, I feel. And I think the book market may be past its peak.
Yeah, it's prime, so to say.
Yeah, it's prime. But that doesn't mean that books will vanish completely, I don't think. I mean, there will always be people that, same with TV and the classic TV that we have. Like when there's a show coming up on like 15 minutes past 8 p.m. in Germany. That's like usually the prime time for big shows.
Yep.
Has been for many years. There will still be people that like watch TV when a show gets aired in the moment. But of course, there's an increasing amount of people that will watch videos on demand when they want to watch them and when they have the time to watch them. Yes. And I think it will be similar to or with books and bookstores. They have a hard time, of course, with the current pandemic as well, even getting harder. But I don't think they will like vanish completely in the foreseeable future. Of course, nobody knows what the situation will be like in like 100 years from now. But for like the next couple of years and maybe even decades, I don't think books will vanish. They will, like what might vanish at some point completely, maybe out of like climate change reasons even, I don't know, will be like printed books. But digital books, I think they will remain, and maybe they will also become the norm. Ebooks, and that kind of stuff.
That might be. I'm still personally pretty sure that even for climate change reasons, printed books will never completely disappear. But you might be right that the focus might shift. It's actually even shifting right now a lot. Ebooks are getting more and more interesting for people. But yeah, it's very hard to give a general answer to a question like that, especially not a yes/no. The question, is the book dying out, is basically not a yes or no question. It is accurate to some degree, but definitely not from many, many perspectives.
But it's what's interesting though is that I can't really say why actually, but I sort of differentiate between like, for instance, books, music, and movies. For instance, nowadays I don't mind not having a physical copy of a movie in my shelf. I could watch it on like streaming platforms. We all know them. But when it comes to music, for the most part, and especially by bands, new albums by bands that I really, really like, I have to have them as physical copies.
Which is completely funny because for me it's the other way around. I think if I have a look around my room, I have one music record in my room, which is vinyl by the band Orwell. But if I look into my shelf, there are tons of Blu-rays. Yeah. So I love having movies as a physical copy as well as books. But however, let's get back to your reading experiences. We have been talking about change a lot right now, which is also why I would like to use that as a segue. You have been talking about your current reading behavior. Would you think that this has changed over the past, let's say, decade or 2 decades? Your reading behavior. Was it different?
Again, good question. I don't think it has changed too much, to be honest. Back when I was studying at university, I read more and regularly because I studied certain subjects and certain courses, and I had to read certain books as well. And it was really interesting. But I think the approach is different, and therefore the intention of reading is different, and I wouldn't say level of enjoyment necessarily, but pretty much your approach. I mean, it's the same with like learning for exams when you went back to school, for instance. It's something different to being genuinely interested in a topic, and then you want to read about that voluntarily, or if you have to read something in order to like pass the test.
And I would also say that there is even another major difference, which I would love to not become the topic now, but reading a book for pleasure is also something different than reading a book for academical research and academical literary analysis, so to say. So I'm just to
both
throw that
can
in.
both can meet pretty much, like both can interact with each other. You can have pleasure reading something you also have to read, of course, but yeah, I would definitely agree.
But when I read a book for pleasure, like I read Casino Royale a couple of weeks ago, I was not making marks and notes. While if I was when I was reading, for example, Lord of the Flies a couple of months ago for university,
good book.
Then I was taking notes, making marks. Completely different approach in that regard as well. But apart from university, would you say that, for example, you have read more when you were a child?
Maybe, but not like novels and books that I would read nowadays. That type of like those sort of books, pretty much. Back in the day, I mean, when I was a real little child, my parents and grandparents would read me something, would read a book to me. For instance, I don't know if you know them, Pixie-Bücher, Pixie books.
I think I do. I haven't heard that word in quite a while.
Yeah.
But I think I have a picture of them in my head.
I don't know if they still exist, actually, but they were really, really popular when I was a kid. And it's pretty much like a miniature colorized book with pictures that were telling like start to finish story, basically. And that always fascinated me, up to the point that when my grandpa, for instance, read a story to me, one of those Pixie books that I already knew, I would correct him if he actually made a mistake, and from he's gonna fall asleep in a second anyway, so I'm gonna make the ending up, I don't know, and then I would correct him, no, Grandpa, that's not the way it went. And stuff like that. We actually just talked about that in a podcast episode that I recorded with my grandpa. He's 85 now. And we also talked about that kind of stuff. That's why, remembered that actually the other day. And
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. But I mean, I wouldn't say that I've ever been like a really regular reader when it comes to books. And so I don't think it has changed that much. Maybe a little, like the focus might have shifted. But yeah.
Okay. So much about that. I could, of course, elaborate as well on how that was for me, but I think the Being an Author podcast is a better opportunity for that, everybody. Now, let's take a little to your story. Before that, however, I want to drop a random fact. Did you know that Jrr Tolkien, I think you know who that is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Did you know that he also did lots of academic research on books, especially from Old English literature, and that he wrote a huge book of secondary literature, like literary analysis on Beowulf, one of the oldest and most well-known Old English long poems.
Sir, in fact, I did not know that yet.
Yeah. I was so surprised because I did some research on Beowulf for the last couple of weeks because I was recording that lecture about it. And then in my library from my university, I was looking for Beowulf books, and then all of a sudden there was one, and then I saw, what, Tolkien? No, wait, that can't be real. And then it was
has to be a different Tolkien. Yeah.
And then it was Jrr Tolkien et al. Literary analysis on Beowulf, which was quite funny. I was also surprised that he actually took lots of scenes and out of Beowulf for his The Hobbit series. But yeah, that's not supposed to be the topic. That was just a random fact in between. Now, so you haven't read too much over the course of your entire life, like not too much. Yeah, you said you're not that much of a regular.
Like every now and then, but not regularly. Yeah.
But would you say, out of all these books that you've read, that you have like a favorite?
Yeah, I guess you can call it a favorite of mine. Like when it comes to books that I read back in school, that we were sort of like quote unquote forced to read, of course, but that I still enjoyed quite a lot was I don't know the English title actually. It's Der Vorleser.
The Reader.
The Reader by.
Yeah. The movie was with Kate Winslet.
True. It's a great book actually. I think also related to the Second World War and a really touching story there. So that I really enjoyed actually.
I just looked it up. It's by Bernhard Schlink.
Ah, okay, yeah. Because I think it was both like was good to read actually. But it was still well written. Like it was still intriguing to read and to find out what's gonna happen. Which is to me when I read novels, which I usually don't do as much, which is one of the most important things that I like from the first maybe like 2 pages onwards. I really have to have the urge to want to know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I probably wouldn't be as interested in continuing to read a book if I wasn't that interested in it initially.
So The Reader is, if I'm not mistaken, a originally German book, right? Or at least in German language.
Yep.
What about international literature? Would you say you have a favorite there, like a non-German book?
I don't think so, to be honest. Like I read a few that I can remember. A Lot of the Flies actually was one of them that I really enjoyed. Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, definitely. I also enjoyed reading that. And then stuff that I usually read isn't like novels most necessarily, but it's rather biographies of musicians that I like, or it's like what we call in German Sachbücher.
Like non-fiction texts.
Fictional texts about certain topics. But I have like, I guess one of my all-time favorite books, it's not in English, even though it got translated to, I think, over 20 languages now. Highly successful book is by the aforementioned German philosopher Richard David Precht. It is Wer bin ich und wenn ja, wie viele? Who am I and if so, how many? I love the title.
Great. I didn't even know that was a book.
It is a book. It was his breakthrough book, actually. He's a German philosopher who basically, even though he is a philosopher, you could say, he has a talent for writing in a way that people can comprehend what it's all about. But it's still very informative. And Wer bin ich und wenn ja, wie viele is pretty much a philosophical journey through the human psyche, you can say. I mean, it's pretty much, it addresses certain questions that we all have, I guess, when you're interested in philosophical topics. What is moral, like ethics? How do people think? Why do people do certain things? Where do we come from? And, questions that other philosophers have asked before, like Immanuel Kant. I mean, Germany has quite a lot of philosophers that have asked many questions. What is the self? What is self? What is das Ich in German, that is? How does the brain work? And what I also really like about his books, and especially in this one also, is that he makes an effort to connect the dots, so to speak. Like, he doesn't really write from a strictly philosophical point of view, but he also tries to incorporate and connect things to different fields of study, so to speak, to different sciences, whether it's psychology, sociology, biology. So he's pretty much painting the big picture, but in a very comprehensive way, and he does it in a great way, I think. So I really love that book. That might be one of my favorite books of all time, actually.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
No, that's nice to hear. that non-fictional literature also has its fan base, so to say, for not just academic reasons. Like I mostly obviously read secondary literature or non-fictional literature for university or research literature. Reasons, Jesus. Sorry, I was just, I'm a little like confused right now. I accidentally stopped my recording. But it's good that you kept talking because I could fix everything.
I figured as much, yeah.
My brain is just a little stressed right now. You know, I had to go fast, but everything's fine. Okay now. I still start to find more interest in non-fictional literature than I had just a year ago or 2 years ago, which is also mostly for university reasons and these lectures that I capture. I'm doing lots of research there as well, which I obviously can't completely get from primary texts and fictional ones. But I'm glad to hear that you liked it. I haven't read it, but it sounds interesting, definitely. It is. But it looked, dear viewers, you can't see us, but we can see each other right now. And he has shown the picture the book into his camera right now, and it looked thick.
It is. It's actually like, let me see. It is like around 400 pages.
Oh, really? It looks like more.
It looks like more. It does, yeah. But it's only 400.
The book that I'm currently reading, this one, it looked thicker than that, but perhaps I'm mistaken. Because this is 500 pages.
Yeah, it's sort of the same, I'd say.
Okay.
The same width.
Okay, then maybe the camera distorted that also.
But that's an interesting point, though. When someone would suggest me like a really long book, maybe like 1,000 pages plus, or even like 2,000 pages, whatever. Chances are that I'm not gonna read it.
Yeah.
Because it may be too long for me to read it in a short amount of time, and then I don't know if I'm gonna have the time to read it in like within a couple of days. Because the problem is sometimes, I think, and that might also be another reason why I'm not like the biggest fan when it comes to like reading novels necessarily, as opposed to reading non-fictional work, is that if I might not have like enough time to read a book in one go, or like within a short amount of time, and there are 2 weeks in between, I might not be able to remember every single important detail that I have to remember to really know or to recollect the story so far. And
do you think you could also connect that to the discussion we had about priorities? That in that time that you would need for a 1,000 plus book, you could read 4 plus 200 pages books.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
That is my personal problem that which is also why I rarely engage to the fantasy genre in novels, because they are mostly very thick, and I just think I could read all of my Sherlock Holmes books or all of my Bond books by reading this one book, and that takes away the interest for me.
And that's no reflection on the quality of those books.
Right,
like, it doesn't have anything to do with the quality, because I guess there can be like 2,000 page long books that are phenomenal, and there you can also have like 300 page books that are complete garbage.
Absolutely.
So it mainly has to do with time, I think. And
yes, and this is also I just want to throw that in right now, which is one of my philosophies when writing Backfire. I know many people who just don't have the time or don't want to take their time to read long books. So I was like, hey, those books are 100 pages plus minus 20 or plus minus 30, and everybody has the time to read that. So why not? And sadly, though, this is what publishers dislike. But whatever.
It is a question of convenience for the most part, I think. And it also is a question about like maybe a very modern thing that people keep talking about more and more for good reasons, because it's true. The attention span of people,
Yeah.
and how it has changed, seemingly has changed over the course of like the last 10 to 15 years. Once social media came up and the internet became the thing, I guess that also really, really has to do with that.
Yes, I would agree
that definitely. I mean, and once again, it's not limited to books. It's also it also affects like YouTube videos. You know, I mean, you also know that as a YouTuber, we can see like the statistics about certain videos, the watch time, how long do people watch a video, and even if it's like a short video, like maybe only 5 minutes, people might only like watch half of it, if at all. And that is, to me, that's crazy. But once again, I mean, then again, I do get where that comes from, because as I've said before, it might have to do with too much to be consumed out there potentially, and time, and adult life things. I don't know. I don't know.
But then again, it's not only adults watching these videos, right? Now, but let's get back to books. We have been talking about your favorite books now. Would you say, doesn't matter if those were books you were forced to read or you read out of your own free choice, but would you say you have read books or a book where you would really say you dislike that? And not just didn't like as much, but where you would really say you have a negative feeling when thinking about it, or the most negative of all the books you've read. Let's say like
wow. Yeah, I definitely remember having read books in school that I didn't like at all. The interesting thing though is I haven't really remembered their titles. Maybe that is why. I mean, I haven't really like, I thought, forget about it. I don't like it anyway, so I don't have to remember the title or the author. But there were sometimes what I don't like when it comes to books and storytelling in general is when it feels forced or when it feels unnatural in a way. When you feel like, and you notice that the author wanted to implement a certain twist on things, for instance. But I, as a reader, when I notice that, it's not authentic. Like it's not pleasant to read sometimes. But that is very much down to personal taste, of course. I mean,
absolutely.
And sometimes and also what I don't really like when it comes to novels, especially, is when I don't have maybe at least a tiny vision of what a story or how a story is going to unfold in the process of reading it. It can be interesting to not know about like what's going to happen and what's the big twist maybe at the end of things, and everything will make sense at the end of the book. But the question is, will I be invested enough to read until the end to find that out? Like the way to the end and to the big reveal, to the climax at the end, maybe, depending on how the book is structured, of course.
I would definitely not recommend reading Casino Royale to you, because this is like a book that starts with 2/3 of technical information about casinos, and then the last 100 pages are actually interesting content, but the rest isn't. So
there's one thing that I remembered just actually when you just talked right now, which was Effie Briest by Theodore Fontana.
As a book you didn't like?
I didn't quite like. I mean, the beginning he's a very descriptive author, if you will. I mean,
I've never read it.
Okay. You haven't missed out on it. I don't think. The first, I don't know, like 20, 25 pages, it's like setting the atmosphere. Like, I get why he does it, but the only thing that he's doing on the first like 20 to 30 pages is describing the house from the outside.
Okay, wow.
What the house looked like. There no protagonist is mentioned, no like anything about the story is mentioned yet. And it just takes forever for him to get to the point and to the meat of the book, the story. And I mean, once again, of course, it's boring to reveal everything right away. That's not what I'm talking about. But establishing the main characters, and not just like on page 50, and like everything before is just like creating an atmosphere. I get why he does it once again, because I think that's what he wanted to focus on, like having a thick mood, thick atmosphere. But I'm not the biggest fan of that. I mean, you can also exaggerate on that, I think, and he did.
Yeah.
He definitely did that.
Definitely. I mean, I haven't read the book, but
and that's actually
definitely exaggerate.
Yeah, and that's actually a shared criticism of many of my schoolmates back in the day. They also criticized that, and I think at some point I also read about the book and what other people think of it, and it seems to be a common criticism with him.
Also a common criticism of Stephen King, I think, because his books are quite popular, Stephen King, right? But he also really takes his time to explain and describe things. Which is why these books, I think, the plot isn't too heavy, but describes every friggin' leaf on a tree sometimes. So.
But I guess there's still a difference to some degree, at least, when you know what you're gonna read. With Effie Breast, saying that in a very English way, Effie Breast by Theodore Fontana. I don't know. I didn't know what to expect. All I knew is that it wouldn't be like a really, tense book, a really suspense-driven book. But
that is because you were forced to read it in school, right?
Yeah, but I think that is different from the background knowledge that you have as a reader. Like, if I were to read a Stephen King novel, I would know, okay, it's most probably gonna be intense. It's gonna be, horror-filled. And I know that something like that is coming, and therefore I'm looking forward to it. But I didn't have that experience with Effie Breast, for instance, and that is maybe that's a difference there. But I get what you mean. Yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah.
Have you read? I don't want to spend too much time on German books now because we're talking about in English. We don't know
German books. No one needs them.
But have you read Der Schimmelreiter by Storm?
No.
Okay, this is. If I'm asked if there's a book I really disliked, I always say that one really sucks.
Okay.
I really didn't like that. Or Kleider machen Leute, also a
Kleider,
very terrible book. And I also didn't like Hamlet, to be honest.
And there's something, another book that I just remembered, Wojciech by what is his first name? Büchner. Büchner is his last name. The problem, quote unquote, the problem with Wojciech for me was that it was sort of like written more or less as a collage of things, and not as a front to back story. If that makes sense. It's interesting. It's an interesting read, definitely. And there's a pretty cool movie about that book with Klaus Kinski. Which is always interesting when Klaus Kinski is involved. But the book itself, and the other thing about that is, I think that was pretty much his last writing that he ever did before he passed. And I think it's not even finished.
Okay.
And then
that happens.
Like students of him, so to speak, try to finish the book, but it's weird. I don't know. It's interesting but weird.
Yeah, but that happens even to the most well-known authors, like also Gottfried von Strasbourg's Tristan and Isolde, which is very well-known, also never finished because he died.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. However, enough of German books. We have talked about these now, and this is actually kind of good segue to another question I have for you, and that is, you have been talking about some German books now, but if you read books that are not of German origin, do you prefer reading it in the original language or in German? Of course, as far as you understand the original language. If you read Don Quixote and you don't know Spanish, then
yeah, doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I guess I would prefer reading it in the original language, in that case English, if it's in like an originally English piece of art, piece of work, because I think sometimes things get lost in translation, and
Very good movie.
yeah, and the problem with that, I mean, the interesting or the funny thing about that argument is that people that don't know the original wouldn't even notice if something got missing, lost in translation, because they don't have a comparison. But
Yeah.
I still like knowing that that happens quite a lot, actually, when it comes to like certain like fixed phrases, for instance, from English to German or vice versa. And there is a certain wit in expressing certain things in English, for instance, that might get lost in German as well. I would rather prefer reading that like books in the original language. Yeah.
Totally agree, totally understand. And also, as someone who writes books and also translates it, I mean, I did this with my Backfire books. And when I originally wrote them in German and then translated them to English, I realized that sometimes not only the artful description might not work the same way, obviously, but sometimes I really had to drop certain details because there was just no way of introducing them that would fit naturally. But also the other way around, especially in the prologue of my first book, there are some actually different details in the German and English version, like certain details of appearances of a character get only, they only say it in the German version, and others are only said in the English version because it just wouldn't fit another way.
Yeah.
And so I understand also the struggle of translators.
I actually can relate to that, what you just said, because I'm in the same position right now. I'm
perfect segue to the 8th question would have been if you would like to elaborate on your writing experience.
Okay. Well, I didn't know the questions beforehand, I have to say. Like it's just great intuition.
Yeah. Perfect.
I guess. We know each other for so long. We've known each other for so long, and we can communicate without words, I guess.
So please, I didn't want to interrupt you. Sorry.
Telepathy. No problem at all. Because I'm sort of in the same position right now because I have written a novel, which is interesting based on what I just said, like all the time of this podcast episode.
Not at all.
Yeah, because I guess I'm usually more the creator as opposed to the consumer. And I've read that book in German. I wrote that book in German. I've read it as well.
You did both, right?
I did both, yeah. And now I'm pretty much like doing the post-production process, like correcting certain things and reading over it as well. And simultaneously, basically, I'm also translating that book to English. And it is, sometimes it's really strange to express the same thing in two languages. Sometimes it works, sometimes it totally doesn't.
Yep.
And so I can definitely relate to that. It's interesting, yeah.
Yep. Also the other way around, the next book that I'm going to publish, I originally wrote that in English. And now I'm working on the German translation, and there are some key metaphors I used over and over again, but they just don't work in German. That is so hard sometimes.
And something else that I also keep noticing when it comes to music, very often actually, I like listening to German music as well, but usually I'm listening to English music. And it's strange. I guess it's probably exactly the other way around for, say, like Americans listening to German music or music that is not in English and reading books that are not in English. I feel, maybe because German is my mother tongue, that sometimes German, it's very easy to express something in German and it sounds cheesy and cliche-ish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And apparently it seems way easier to express something really like eloquently and pompous in English and without it sounding cliche-ish or pathetic even.
Yes.
But maybe but I guess to some degree that might be just like my German point of view, and maybe that's not the case on an objective level of things. I don't know. But I also figured that when I translated the book, or I'm in the process still, and it will take quite a long time still, I think. Sometimes I even had like 1 or 2 moments in which I thought, while translating it, wouldn't have been cool to write that book in English from the first, from first hand, and not starting writing that in German. But back when I wrote it, which is pretty much like more than 10 years ago, I actually didn't question that.
Yeah.
I just like wrote it in German because duh.
Having the same problem with Backfire. That was the first thing I started, and I started in German, and now I can't stop writing it in German. But all the other concepts I'm always starting in English, because it just feels, I don't know, it feels more artful. It feels better to write in English somehow.
But sometimes, I mean, still, when, for instance, when you were to translate an English song, like a pop song that pretty much everyone knows, popular song, from English to German, you would notice that even the English stuff also is cheesy, but it just doesn't appear to be cheesy because of the language barrier in a way.
Absolutely.
Even if you understand what those words mean and those phrases, subconsciously they still don't sound as, cliche-ish.
Yes. I completely agree. By the way, your book, of course you don't have to, because I think you never made a big official note about any of that, but would you like to elaborate a little on what it is about, or would you rather not?
I mean, I don't want to give away too much, because it pretty much, it also contains like certain twists and turns to the story, which are pretty fundamental, but it's pretty much a mixture of sort of a love story. There's drama elements in it. There are thriller elements in it. There are supernatural elements in it, sort of philosophical elements, definitely crime elements. It's pretty much like a melting pot of things and genres. But in my head, it makes sense. I hope it also makes sense for the reader, because sometimes that is also something that I wouldn't say I'm worried about necessarily, but what I'm asking myself is like, is that what I came up with? Does that make sense for readers as well? Yes. I don't know about you, if you feel the same sometimes when you write things, or you're questioning yourself. Is it like digestible enough for readers, or is it like too abstract maybe? And
I understand that. I have been in this position quite a few times, and actually also from practical experience, like I always give my text to different people to read over it before I publish it, and not for lecturing reasons, but for getting opinions, because I could still change things. And there were some moments when I gave a script to a friend, and he or she said, but when we were talking about a certain thing, how did you like that twist? And then they were like, oh, really? Oh, I didn't really get that you meant that. Because I perhaps wrote it in a way that was too indirect.
Yeah.
But then the other way around, sometimes I'm writing things and I'm really hoping, please let the readers not understand what I mean, so that 10 books later I can finally explain it. Different struggles.
That is pretty much like the beauty of art in general, I think, that people can understand one thing in 10 different ways.
Absolutely.
And I guess that is totally okay when it comes to, for instance, lyrics to a song. Like the listener doesn't have to have the same comprehension about it as the composer necessarily, or the lyricist. It can be different, and that is okay. But of course, when it comes to books, who usually have, of course, you can have a novel that is quite ambiguous, but usually there is a fixed storyline leading throughout it. And if people get like a totally wrong impression of it, and then the whole story doesn't make sense to them, of course that can be a problem. Yeah. So I can also relate to that. Yeah.
These plural, this plural of meaning is something that I'm really interested in, which is why I really love this academic style of literary analysis, which also this lecture series I'm doing is about. I really have lots of fun because sometimes I analyze and interpret books, and then I read an article and they came to a completely different conclusion.
Yeah.
Which is actually, that was once again a coincidental perfect segue because I have a final question that is about something completely different, but it just suddenly fit now.
Okay.
Because my final question is, since you were also studying some kind of literature to a certain degree, and my question is, have you ever done research analysis on a novel on an academic level? Like real deep literary analysis of a book?
No, I wouldn't say so.
But you have done, obviously you have done literary analysis and interpretation in school, right?
Yeah.
And would you say that you've ever perhaps done that out of your own interest? Like not just by reading it?
Maybe, yeah. If it was intriguing enough, maybe, yeah. I mean, but then, because I'm also like very critical when it comes to those kinds of things, it has to be like a very intriguing piece of work for me to invest my thinking in that so much to a like really detailed level and deep level. But sometimes it can be fun. But I think then again, sometimes I'm also questioning myself, like, am I on the right track here? And of course, I can't know for sure. Then I would have to read like other analyses of analyses of of the same book, for instance. But I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting question once again. I don't know. Probably, I like rather not. I don't think, but
okay.
I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, if there is like really something that I'm really, really fascinated by, and I'm really like a big fan of, then maybe, yeah.
Okay. Good. Then there's. I think we should start to come to an end because we are at, I don't know, like almost an hour, I think. And I think we have come to some interesting ideas and conclusions.
Definitely.
I know that the structure might not have been too perfect, but it's the first time I'm working on it, and I enjoyed have to work a little on how to properly interact in an interview like that.
But sometimes it's also cool to have like an improvisational element to it. So
of course, I didn't want it to be too scripted. Like
I didn't mind. I enjoyed it.
Now, there's one final thing that I have kind of prepared. It's not a question. It's more like something that you will get something from, more or less, not physically, but because now, together, you and I, we will find a recommendation of a book for you.
For me?
Yes.
Okay.
To perhaps read someday, and by the way, not a book. I'm talking about any kind of fictional work now, so it could be a novel, a short story, or a poem.
All right.
Depends. So first of all, what I need you to do is, oh no, I forgot to prepare a coin, is to say heads or tails.
Heads.
Okay. I have 2 tables, which I will need for the last thing. And if you are right with heads, I will use the first table. If you are wrong with tails, I will use the second table. So
okay.
You said tails, right?
Heads,
sorry.
50-50.
And it is heads.
Yeah.
Which means you are wrong because you said tails, right?
No, I said heads.
No, you said tails.
9, I said heads.
Yes.
9? No, I
Okay.
said heads.
Okay, and it was heads, so you are right. So I'm going to use the first table. And now I need a number between 1 and 20. Now each of these numbers stand for a letter, but I have my own kind of random order. So
Okay.
one number from 1 to 20.
7.
Great. I now have a letter. I'm now walking over to my bookshelf and find a story of an author with that letter. And I'm going to recommend it to you, and I'm going to find one that you are going to like. I'm pretty sure about that, I hope.
Okay.
So, you now have 1 minute to entertain the viewers.
Okay. Yeah, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this. I might not have been like the most proficient expert on novels, as you might have figured, but I still enjoy reading not only books, but articles and different texts, interesting texts about different topics. And I think no matter if you're really like a big fan of novels or if you just read them every now and then, I think what's important, especially these really increasingly complex times, is to remain curious about the world and what's happening around us. And, you know, because that's pretty much one of the essences of life, I think, and living. Remaining curious about what's happening around you and, yeah. The end.
I really get why you like that philosophical book. I think the viewers get that too now. I have found a story. So, by the way, when you decided for number 7, you decided for the letter E.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found a story. It is a short story of just around 15 pages, I think.
Okay.
And it's actually my favorite short story.
Ever?
It was fitting that, yes, ever.
Wow. Okay.
That you chose this letter. I think it's a good one. Maybe you've heard of it. I don't know. It is by Harlan Ellison, and it is called "I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream."
Oh,
It
no,
is
I haven't heard about it, but it sounds intriguing.
It is a, I think one would say a grim sci-fi short story, just around 15 pages long. I think it's also available for free on the internet. And yeah, as I said before, it's my absolute favorite short story of all time.
Wow.
And I would think that you might like it. Just
Okay.
15 pages long, so perhaps you can actually...
Yeah.
This is how the book looks like, where it's from. That's Harlan Ellison.
I think I've seen him before, actually. Like, he seems to be familiar. I don't know where, though, like, but yeah, I think I've seen his face before somewhere. Maybe I'm confusing things, but don't know. I'm old.
Anyway, so that is your recommendation. And,
Thank you very much.
Dear people out there, if you are similar to Dave, perhaps you might also like that story. Thank you for being part of this first episode.
Thanks for inviting me. For having me.
Thanks for being the, well, in German we would say Versuchskaninchen, the lab rat, so to say.
The lab rabbit.
Right.
Translate literally, so to speak.
Yeah. For this thing, I'm really happy with our results, and
Me too.
yeah, thank you out there for listening. You can also type in the comment section below what you would like us, or would like me and my future guests to make differently. I'm very happy for any kind of feedback and critique, but also share your ideas and your comments about the results we have and the questions we had. So yeah, I'm very ready for another conversation in the comment section below. So thank you all for tuning in, and read you all soon. Bye, Dave.
Bye-bye.